I saw a post on Instagram yesterday that said something along the lines of like, people truly believe that services for people in poverty are A, readily available, and B, reliable. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem in getting people to be empathetic and care about servicing these things, because they think that people are just being lazy and that they just aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that's why they're in poverty. And so I just felt like I should share my perspective as someone who used to run a wait list for a children's shelter. This shelter housed children from birth to 12 years old, no older than that, so no parents, just their children. And we are one that ran pretty well, that we stayed really consistent about being in contact with people, and people were still waiting, sometimes months, sometimes over a year, to get their child into our services. This is while they're facing homelessness. This is while they're facing mental health crisis. This is while they're facing physical health crisis. This is while they're facing having their utilities turned off. This is while facing really dangerous situations. And there wasn't much I could do about it. It's really hard to be in this crisis, and you still have to be mentally stable enough to take care of your child, to take care of yourself, to feed everybody, to find money or food or whatever that you have to gather every single day just to keep yourself flowing while in the midst of all this waiting. So if you were a parent that called me for services, this is kind of how it would go. You'd call me. I would ask you all these questions about your child, their age, where they go to school, their gender, what is your crisis, what kinds of things are you doing to stay stable, can I connect you to any services, and you're probably going to tell me, these are all of the things that I'm going to do, and it's like, yeah, those are basically all the things I would tell you to do, and then you're going to ask me, so how long will it be until my kids can be there? And I'm going to say, I can't give you an estimate. Some people wait a couple of weeks, some people wait months. And what I didn't tell people usually, because this feels really bad, is that there were some people who waited over a year to get into our services. And that really fucking sucks to hear while you're in the midst of crisis. Now, jump into my seat, and I have so many factors that I have to consider before I let a child in. First of all, we only have like 20 beds. 5 of those beds were only for infants. No other older children could be in the infant room. 2 of those beds are reserved for DCFS. So like if they have a child that they can't figure out any other place for them to go, and they really need a safe place for that child to go, they can come to our bed. We save it for them. We had a contract with them. So really that puts us down to 13 beds that can be filled by any other children. Now, then in all of the bedrooms, they're by gender, because once you are above the age of 2, we have to separate you by gender. And so there are girls' rooms and boys' rooms. So if I have an opening, I have to consider, is it a girls' room or a boys' room? Is it a baby's room? How does your family fit into the openings that we have? I have to consider, what is your crisis level? Like, are you don't really have a home, but you have couches that you can stay on, versus someone who's living in their car, versus someone whose children might freeze to death if I don't get them into this housing. And it's really hard to judge like whose crisis is higher than the other, because everybody's crisis is important, but some people are at more risk of loss of life or like direct harm if I don't get them in than other people. I have to consider the behaviors, because my staff can only facilitate so many behaviors or physical, disabilities or whatever, before they are at their capacity, and they're not going to be providing good care. So if I have a bunch of children who have like really high behavioral needs, I can't bring in another child who's going to have really high behavioral needs, because my staff are already at their wits' end. They already can't, they can only manage so much and still be good caregivers. So I have to be cognizant of what children I'm bringing in and what behaviors, what their needs are, so that we are properly meeting their needs. If, a lot of the time parents don't tell you, or they don't know how their children will behave because they're separated from their parent. And so a lot of the time we bring in children who we think are going to have, an okay time. They're never going to be great when they're separated from their parents, but we think they're going to be okay overall. And then we bring them in and their behaviors are off the wall. They are hitting children. They are screaming. They are having all of these tantrums all the time. And I have to remember that, like, we don't know what's going to happen, and so I have to just manage all of those things. I have to manage the fact that we only have space, the time, and the transportation to take children to 2 different schools. So if I already have children that are school age from 2 different schools, I can't bring any other school age children until these children who are already here leave. If the children are like of severely different ages, if I have a room full of 3-year-olds, it's probably not a great idea to bring a 12-year-old into that room, even though they might be the same gender, they might have, normal behaviors, and sometimes the crisis level is high enough that I'm just like, we're just gonna have to try it. But just on that factor, like, a 12-year-old doesn't want to be in a room with a bunch of 3-year-olds, and like, depending on all of the dynamics, it might not be safe for a 12-year-old to be in the same room as 3-year-olds every night. All of those things go into just me trying to figure out who can fit in there. Not to mention that there are, 50 people waiting on my list at all times. Each family has a maximum stay of 90 days. So all of the children that are already in these beds that we have could be there for the full 90 days. That means 3 months of waiting if everybody came in on the same day and left. 3 months of waiting just for 13 people. So that means 13 other children can fill in those spaces 3 months from now if they stay the whole time, which a lot of the time they don't, for a variety of reasons. But while they're there, our goal as the social workers is to get these parents the goals that they were trying to set. So if they don't have a job, we're helping them get a job. If they don't have housing, we're helping them get housing. And the shitty thing is that we are working with them the entire 90 days, and there are so many times that these children go home and those goals have not completely been met. They've made progress. They're in halfway housing. They're in, a training program. They are talking to people about getting a job, but they don't have any of those things a lot of the time because it takes a really fucking long time. They have had their children separated from them for 3 months voluntarily so that they can get these goals set, so that they can give their children better lives. And they have people on their side talking to them every single day, trying to get them into this next stage of their life. And they still aren't able to do it because these services move so fucking slow. Another thing is, like, childcare vouchers. A lot of the time, they don't allow you to put your child in childcare until you have a job. But you can't get a job if you don't have childcare. You can't get into job interviews if you don't have childcare. If you have nowhere for your child to go while you do a job interview, how are you going to interview for the jobs? If you have nowhere for your children to go until after you have a job already set, are they just going to keep pushing back your start date until you get those childcare vouchers all set up? Because those childcare vouchers take a long time to process too. So it's a bunch of bullshit over and over and over again that, like, stops them from being able to progress the way that people think that they should be able to. And a lot of services have things like, they tell you to call every single day. Oh, call every single day so that to see if we have a spot for your family to all stay together in the same housing. Call every day to see if we can get you in. Or like getting food from a food bank, like you have to wait in line, you have to show up at a certain time, blah, blah, blah. And like all of that is supposed to happen while they're supposed to be trying to get a job. Like, what time do they have if they are working, trying to get themselves out of this hole? It's not fucking easy. Being in poverty is such hard work. Not to mention that so many of these services, you call them every single day, you call them multiple times a day, you call them different times of the day, they don't fucking answer. They don't answer, you leave them a message, they don't call you back. Like, the city of Cleveland had this system. It was called like coordinated intake, and it was supposed to be that all of the like family shelters in the area or like adult shelters in the area were all connected. So you just call this one number and they will make sure that they know what beds are open in every single place. But you know how many times people would call me and I'd be like, okay, make sure you get on the list on coordinated intake because that's just like a normal step. And they'd be like, I have called them every day for a week and I cannot get them to pick up their phone. So they can't even get on the list because nobody is answering their phone and like nobody's following up with them. And that's not because these employees are bad employees. It's because they are overwhelmed. There's so much to do and keep track of. Like, I know I only had the one thing to keep track of, and it was really hard for me. And I was checking in with people monthly. Every month, I would call every single person on my wait list and be like, how are things going? What are things I can connect you to? Have things changed about your situation? And they were like, no one has ever followed up with me about anything before. Like, I was in a good system, and it took people so long to get into our services, if they ever got into them at all. Like, I wish that people understood that, like, it's not as easy as, like, just go to get job services, just go to a homeless shelter. Like, it's not simple, and it's not quick, and a lot of the time people are facing lots of poverty, lots of trauma, lots of unsafe situations just to, like, tread water until any of these services will help them with anything. And a lot of the time the services need other things in order to get them going. It's a fucking mess.